Hey everybody, Adam from Atlas Gunworks. We're going to talk about the history today of the 2011 mags, and that should help people a little bit have an idea of kind of how to get a system that works. And the goal here is just for you guys to be able to get a system that works. The mags are the weak point in the system for sure. There's only a couple of people making the bodies for the mags. And so we gotta, navigating the mags is the key to making everything better. So the history of the mags, as most of you would know, the guns had a patent on them. So SVI, which is one of their old style tubes, and here's an STI, so this is a 9 and a 40. This is their old style tubes. These guys are the only two who were making mag tubes for the longest time, basically for the first 20-something, 25 years of this thing being in existence. Maybe almost 30 years, really. But we didn't have a lot of choices. Of the two, in different calibers, you had different advantages or disadvantages. So what do we look for when we're trying to put a mag together? And then I'll get back to the history a little bit. But we're looking for this. I'm looking for the mag to... I want the mag nice, clean in and out, drop free, right? These two do this in this gun. Now, what you got to think about is every single grip in every single gun is different, right? So the plastic grips have some variance. The PT Evos have a different angle slightly than the regular PTs. Sometimes when those guys don't make their mark on machining a steel grip, they're tighter or looser. So, for instance, you know, this mag right here probably fits in 85% of the guns in this building, but there's probably a handful that doesn't because they're tighter. So there's tolerances everywhere. So that's one thing we have to look at. The other thing we have to look at is where these mag catch, holes, whatever, indicator, lockout hole, whatever you want to call it, where these are drilled. So they're never always the same. So these guns are made they're stamped out and then put together, welded. So this is going to float a little bit. That's all done when the sheet's flat. It's not done after the fact. So these are never always perfect. And every gun potentially has that mag catch. Could have a variance in it, and it could be a variance where the mag catch sits in the gun. So we care about how high these sit in the gun for sure. The guns are super sensitive to how high they fit. But anyway, so in the beginning, we just have SV and STI. Of the two, in 9mm, SV doesn't need spacers, STI does need spacers. So for 40 cal, the STI mags worked pretty well, and the SVs were definitely dominant in the 9mm realm. The SVs are a little stiffer, so they're harder to tune, but once you get them tuned, they tend to stay, the feed lips and everything's a little stiffer, a little stronger, a little harder. It lasts a little longer. Maybe possibly more prone to cracking, but... So these SV old tubes are like dinosaurs. They're super hard to find. They're rare. They're worth a lot of money. Guys who have them don't let go of them. So these are not a practical solution unless you have a set. So ignore that those exist at this moment. Then SV New Gen comes out. And the New Gen mags are ambi, which is cool. But they changed some of the dimensions up top. And it didn't change how well they worked. They feed probably the best of all the tubes. They dimensionally are the most correct, and they're probably dimensionally the most consistent internally dimensions. But they don't fit into STI guns well. So STI, I don't know if it was more SV or STI, but somebody made a change so that these mags don't click into the newer, or these mags won't click into the new STI, or any STI gun really. But it's in particular the new guns. So you can't just buy a set of these without doing a relief cut on the frame of the STI guns. So if you have an STI gun, the newer style, which is the last 10 years, this is 07 or 17, so from 08 or 9 on, these new style, and you can tell by they say Stray or Void on them. So, or Void Stray or Signature, yeah, Signature. All right, they're stamped with their name. The old ones don't have that, and the old ones aren't ambi. So this, again, 9mm no spacer probably beats these in spacer. 40, we could probably make either one work well. And again, a little tougher, a little harder, last a little longer. So then bring MBX into the mix. And MBX does a really nice tube. The quality of the tubes is really good. MBX has never to date, 2017, made a follower that works great. So the mags work often quite, maybe 99% of the time, but they have follower problems. The STIs and the SVIs, we tend to not use their guts. Almost all the competition guys end up using different guts. So that's a thing that you got to keep in mind, that we're going to put different guts in these. So that kind of comes into play. This is an MBX mag. The newer, he's changed these twice, at least twice, but the newer MBX style mags, you can tell because they are right here. Let's see if we get a good camera angle on this. Some light. We'll see here. Let me see if we can back this up. We haven't quite got my light on my new. That's partly why you haven't seen a ton of videos. I haven't got the light on the new bench just figured out yet. But right here, actually, we'll do this. We'll do this old school. Just put a flashlight on it. See what that does. So right here, there's no crease right here in this spot and this spot. So this flashlight stinks. Let's see if my other one's any better. There we go. So right here and here on an older style one, so here and here, you're going to see a deep crease. The Graham's followers don't work in those older mags, and these are hit or miss whether they kind of work anyway, the Graham's setups in there, and I have not tried the Terrans yet, but so good mag body, follower system not great, but he tried to make the follower system proprietary, so it is not ideal. There's no ideal setup to date with an MBX tube, and they keep making new followers. Maybe they'll get it right. Then enter STI with their new mag, probably the nicest mag body produced. Problem, and this one, well, we'll come back to that. Probably the nicest mag body ever produced. Dimensions, no good. So the internal dimensions are not correct, and what we have is when the bullets stack in here, often the bullets are getting to a spot where they're bound up. And you can see kind of how messy they stack up in here, but we get the bullets in a spot where they can't get by each other and the follower spring doesn't have enough pressure, and it happens in these when they're full, when you're at 20 or 21 rounds, and what happens is there's not much follower pressure pushing up here, and when the slide hits it, the bullet dives into the ramp and stops. So, the first 5 rounds out of these are often trouble that way. So I've yet to see, they're right on the edge of having the dimensions good, so what you see with these new STI mags is that, I'll make up numbers, but half of them work and half of them don't, so not a risk I'm willing to take. But they use a one piece, they stamp it out in one piece, fold it around, weld it in the back. It's actually, that part, they're having these made by somebody else. That part works well. They're nice like that. The external dimensions are nice. They drop in and out of almost every gun perfectly. I mean, they really, that's dragging on the spring there. But yeah, and then they're not super hard, so they're easy to tune. That means they're going to bend up a little easier. But we're hoping STI gets their stuff figured out and these are viable. But in the fall of 2017, I would run away from those mag tubes. I would not run those. And everything I'm speaking to here is assuming we're going to get max capacity at 140 millimeters or 170 millimeters. I haven't messed with the 120s, and I haven't messed with the STIs with their own follower system, although I hear it's having issues, but I don't have any direct relationship to that. But we're talking about USPSA or some kind of competition, IPSIG, and we want to get the max rounds in 140 millimeter mag, right? So how do we do it? So these mags are out because they're dimensionally unreliable internally. So new STI mags are out. Can we use an MBX mag? Maybe. So what I'm seeing with the MBX mags is that the body is dimensionally okay if you have the right follower setup, but at one point in 2016, in the middle of the year, or spring to middle of the year, they had a great follower system. It worked really well. They've changed that 2 or 3 times since then, and the new system I've not seen to be super reliable. The biggest problem with these mags and the setup is that they're like 99.5% reliable. So you might only, or 99.9, you might only ditch, or 999, whatever the number ends up. It might only fail once in 1,000. Well, you're getting the same problem you're having here. The bullets are stacking up a little funny, and every now and then we don't have enough spring pressure, and we get one that hits a ramp and stops because the bullet wasn't sitting up the way it needs to. What we need is when that slide comes over this thing, we need this bullet to not dive terribly. They're going to dive some. When that slide catches that like that, it's going fast. I mean, it's nasty momentum. I really can't reproduce it here, but there's a little bit of dip and there's some front dive, but we need that follower to keep the pressure up. So I would tell you that for the most part, the only way that we're getting any success with these is to run the newer ones with the grams followers. And if you have older MBX mags, the follower and the tube are a system, right? So the old, whatever it is, never the follower with any of these, but especially with the MBX. If you have a follower, that follower and that tube are a pair. I would always keep those together and just change the springs. If you're running the actual MBX mags and his springs last half as long as everyone else's. So I normally change my springs on a grams or a Terran setup twice a year. I would change it like in the spring coming into the season, so like April before the majors start, and then I would change it once mid-season before the second set of majors, like in August or July, and that's when I do the bulk of my shooting. And then I'd ride that one right to the end of the year. So 2 times a year I'm changing. On these, you're probably doing it 4 times, and you got to mess with the followers. There's a lot of micro tuning, and again, you see guys who swear these work. And those are the guys who every now and then have to rack one out of the gun, and that was probably, the mag. It took a while for us to kind of see all that, but that's what all the evidence is pointing to, is that the failure rate is just really low, but it's still a failure rate. But these fit in the guns nice, drop out nice. They have a nice polish. The witness holes are in the right spots. That's great. So, what are our real choices? The old Sti Mags, they are not making anymore, but there are lots and lots out there. These are great in 40 cal because there's no spacer and we don't have to worry about any of spacer nonsense. Spacers are a pain in the ass and not really worth it. So if you've got old set of 40s, these are better than the new ones by far. I know they don't look as cool, but keep them. And even if you want to run them in 9mm, you can run them with spacers. That's it's a viable option. These have been around for 20-something years and they work. And we know it. And sometimes the tubes are really bashed up and you got to do work to them. But once you get them there, they're usually good. And the only difference between once you get these running in 40 and, an SV tube is that you're going to get a little more flex and bend quickly in your feed lips. But once you get that squared out, or you check that, and you should be checking that anyway, then life's good. So we can't get these. This is not, a going forward thing. So where are we left with? We're left with the SV tubes. Again, probably dimensionally, internally the best tubes. External dimensions, they sometimes are hit or miss. You can quite often get one of these. Oh, this one. Yeah, this one will do it. This one doesn't even, it won't really click in this. I got to push it to get it in the gun, right? And sometimes they won't even come in or out when you push they're way stuck in here. Front to back, they're often big. So that's a problem. There's usually a big burr right here you got to clear out. This one's still got it. You're probably not going to see that real well, but there's a big burr right there. That always needs to get cleaned out. The feed lips are hard to adjust because they're so hard, and if you go too far, it's really hard to bring them back. So there's some work to be done there. They don't come with witness holes. This one we already drilled. And then often these flanges down here are pointed downward, kind of, so it lets your base pad flop around. And when your base pad flops around like this, you often with the spring don't fit in the gauge. So you got to bend these up so that this sits on there nice and tight and you fit in the gauge. And if that's something to be checking all the time with these because they're right on the line. So there's a bunch of work to do to these to get them to work. But once you do, I say that this thing is 99% or whatever, and this one all tuned up, the older ones are probably 100, and this thing's like 50%, right? So once you get these, and this, so again, not a viable option. 99 and not being able to get a follower system that works, not really a viable option to me at this point. And some of them work better than others, but as a group, we can't have that 1% failure rate. These, once you get them set, They just go. They work. So they're awful. They're overpriced. They're expensive. They're awful to work with, like getting them set up. But once you do, you've got the real deal. So that's the direction we're at now. Hopefully, there's a better follower system here soon. Hopefully, STI fixes their dimensions on the internal part of the tube, and maybe we'll get a whole new player. You know, there's some foreign folks who make the tubes and stuff, but they're not. None of them are a viable option. They're not very consistent. So I'm going to do a video later next week that shows every step to us tuning one of these, and I'll show all the nasty one. You know, we'll find some nasty ones that don't fit in guns, and we'll show you how to do all that, so you can just build your own killer tubes.